Sienna's silver fountain pen skipped across the damp authorization line. The nib caught on the rough paper, leaving 3 broken strokes instead of her usual clean signature. Behind us, the river pressed hard over the gray stones, loud enough to swallow the first words she said. "You changed the guest layout without approval." I kept one hand on the weatherproof binder between us. I moved the auction tables out of the riverside pavilion after the overnight wind warning. That pavilion is in the donor package the board approved. The South Access Road washed out at mile 3. Catering is stranded below the ridge, another storm cell is moving in, and Chairman Vail wants a failure he can put in front of the investment committee by Monday. I wasn't going to leave 200 guests under a roof the wind might test. The pen stopped in her fingers. She had personally sponsored the acquisition of Alder Run 6 months earlier. If the charity retreat failed, the board would sell the property to a developer, remove her from the promotion track, and call the entire project proof that she had mistaken beauty for value. I would lose the resort I had rebuilt from an abandoned fishing lodge. She would lose the career she had spent 10 years making difficult to dismiss. I needed her signature on an emergency expense override before I could activate the alternate supply route. She needed me to stop making decisions that belonged to her. For 6 months, our video calls had ended at the exact second the agenda did. Once, she had almost asked what I did after midnight when the lodge went quiet. I'd answered a question she had not finished, then spent the rest of the call pretending I had not heard the change in her breathing. Since then, we had both stayed safely inside spreadsheets. Now she sat beside me on a wool blanket by the river, wearing a pale floral dress under a light field jacket, the wrong clothes for wet grass and the right expression for a boardroom fight. "You should have called me before moving the auction," she said. I called at 5:12. My phone was in airplane mode while I drove the pass. I sent the revised floor plan at 5:14. That is not the same as asking. She was right. I disliked the fact with enough precision to feel it behind my teeth. Alder Run had survived because I made decisions before problems became visible. I had treated speed like permission for so long that I sometimes forgot other people did not find that reassuring. I should have asked, I said. Her eyes lifted from the paper. The River Outfitters safety packet, the North Trail load plan, the weather window, and the emergency cost sheet waited beneath her hand. I turned the binder so the pages faced her instead of me. "The alternate route is yours to approve or reject. If you reject it, we reduce the guest count, move the gala into the lodge, and notify the board that the menu will change. The property stays safe, but tonight will not match the donor package. And if I approve it? We use the North Service Trail for staff and hot equipment. Licensed river pilots bring sealed cold storage through the lower back channel, not the main current. Every load is weighed, logged, and fitted with flotation. Mateo has the ATV team staged at the trail junction. Chef Lena has 3 hours to choose what she can safely serve. You already arranged all of that. I arranged availability. I did not release payment." Her pen tapped once against the binder. Then again. It was the same rhythm I had heard through 6 months of conference calls, whenever she was deciding whether to trust a number or expose the person who had produced it. "Chairman Vail thinks the developer's offer is cleaner than another year of operating risk," she said. "He thinks concrete is easier to understand than hospitality. He thinks I approved this property because I liked the photographs. You approved it because the guest retention model was stronger than the board city portfolio." Her mouth shifted. Not quite a smile. "You memorized my presentation." I disagreed with slide 19. "You sent me 7 pages about slide 19. It had an optimistic labor assumption. It had a cautious labor assumption. It had both. That was the problem." For the first time that morning, the pen stopped tapping. The faintest laugh escaped her, quick enough that the river nearly took it. Then she bent over the authorization sheet and tried again. The silver nib skipped once more on the damp paper. She frowned at it. "The paper's rough," I said. "The pen behaves perfectly on proper paper." "That sounds like a threat to the paper." "It is a performance review." She signed the override with a broken but legible line and handed the binder back. "If the river pilot cancels, you stop," she said. "If the wind crosses the structural limit, you move the gala. If Chef Lena says the food cannot be held safely, the menu changes. You do not overrule any of them to protect the look of the event. I closed the binder, agreed. And no more changes in my approval lane without asking. The sentence found the exact place where my reflex usually hardened. I could have explained that the wind warning had come before sunrise, that the auction relocation took 8 staff members and 2 hours, that waiting might have cost us the only safe indoor setup. Every explanation was true. None of them changed what I had done. Agreed, I said again. Sienna glanced toward the uneven stones between the blanket and the trail. Her city shoes had thin soles, and the dew had turned the moss dark. I can walk, she said before I asked. I believe you. I stood and stepped onto the nearest flat stone. Then I offered my hand, palm up, without moving closer. She looked at it for a moment. I kept still. When her fingers settled into mine, they were colder than the air. I matched her balance as she rose, waited until both feet were secure, and let go. Let's save your promotion, I said. She brushed a blade of wet grass from her dress. I thought we were saving your resort. 2 deliverables, 1 weekend. That is the most romantic sentence you have ever said to me. I looked at her. She looked back. Then she lifted the binder between us. Do not make me regret signing this. The licensed river outfitter arrived at 8:20 with 2 pilots, sealed cargo nets, flotation gear, and a written operating limit for the protected back channel. Only chilled ingredients and boxed serviceware went by water. Staff and cooking equipment came up the North Trail on Mateo's utility vehicles. At the dock, I checked weights, seal numbers, and temperatures against the load manifest. Sienna stood beneath the awning in borrowed waterproof boots, dark denim, and a charcoal sweater. The boots were 1 size too large. She compensated with shorter steps and pretended not to. The pilot added a second spotter, I said when she noticed the surcharge. Good. Safety costs what it costs. A box shifted on an approaching utility vehicle. I lifted my radio, but Mateo had already signaled the driver. Sienna glanced at me. That looked painful. I was conserving battery. Of course. Mateo grinned as he passed us. By 10, the ingredients were on site, the staff had checked in, and Chef Lena stood at the center table in Kitchen 2 with a thermometer in one hand and the original menu in the other. She had run kitchens in 3 countries and had once told me that hotel owners were useful, mainly because somebody had to sign checks. The short ribs will be safe, she said, but they will not be ready for 7 if you want the texture you sold the donors. I looked at the production board. Pressure braise in smaller batches? We can do half the portions that way, not 200. We have reserve poultry? We do. We also have wild mushrooms, polenta, and enough stock for a second main. I can serve 2 choices, but the printed menu has 1. I looked toward Sienna. She folded her arms. This is Lena's call. I knew that. The old impulse still reached for the command board. Lena watched me reach for it. Then she moved the marker out of my hand. No, she said. You asked for my professional judgment. The kitchen went quiet around us without anyone appearing to stop. My first version of the day would have pushed the short ribs because the donor package promised them. My second version, the one Sienna had forced into the room beside the river, looked at the temperature log and the woman holding the thermometer. Build the dual menu, I said. Keep the short rib for the first 100, poultry for the second 100, same sides. Update allergen cards and service sequence. Lena nodded once. That I can deliver. Sienna's shoulders lowered by a fraction. I pointed at the original menu card. Can we change the print stock before 5? Sienna lifted the silver pen from her tablet case. I know a portfolio manager with excellent handwriting. The pen has already filed 1 complaint today. It only objects to poor surfaces and poor leadership. Lena looked between us. I will leave before this becomes whatever it is. It is governance, Sienna said. It is making my kitchen uncomfortable, Lena replied. She walked away with the marker, leaving the production board under her control. At 11:30, Sienna stood over 16 bruised orchid arrangements. They look like they survived a hostile merger, she said. That might appeal to Vale. He would ask whether they reduced headcount. Mateo had brought pine tips, fern, and smooth river stones from storm cleanup. Sienna removed the tired orchids anchored the ferns with gray stones and turned a damaged shipment into a design that belonged beside the water. "You are changing the approved aesthetic," I said. "I am correcting it." "Then proceed." That was nearly human. She uncapped the silver pen with her teeth. "You will ruin the nib." "You are monitoring my stationery now?" Recurring operational concern. 40 minutes later, every table carried pine, fern, and stone. At my radio station, I found a black coffee with a note taped to the lid in her handwriting. Recurring operational risk. I drank it cold because the wind shifted before I noticed it. 3 gusts crossed 30 miles per hour, and the saturated soil around the north anchor softened. Mateo and Priya Shah, our structural lead, measured a 9% drop in cable tension. "We can add stakes," I began. "No," Priya said. "Wet soil will give you the appearance of reinforcement. We use rated screw anchors at the surveyed points. Add ballast, retention, and hold the readings for 20 minutes. The gala starts in 6 hours. It starts after I sign the clearance." I wanted motion. Priya wanted proof. I keyed the radio. Pavilion setup stays paused. Prepare the lodge fallback. Nobody returns until Priya clears it. Sienna waited until Mateo's crew moved. Would your stakes have worked? For my anxiety, immediately, and for the pavilion? Apparently not. That may be the healthiest sentence you have said today. Priya's crew installed the anchors with a hydraulic driver while Mateo added water ballast. I updated the command board with the wind limit, evacuation route, and indoor fallback. Sienna warned the board liaison that the welcome reception might move. When he complained about the donor experience, she said, "Not as much as ignoring an engineer." The readings held for 20 minutes. Priya signed a conditional clearance requiring checks every half hour. Sienna signed beneath her, and the silver nib skipped across the damp clipboard. "Still the paper?" I asked. "Today I am willing to consider user error." Priya handed me the signed readings and started toward the service road. Mateo remained beside the command board. "You put the fallback inside the lodge," he said. "Yes." "The east doors create a bottleneck if the buses arrive together." I had placed those doors on the route because they were closest to the pavilion. Mateo had spent 12 winters watching guests move through the building. "What do you recommend?" "North veranda, split arrivals by bus number. Housekeeping can keep the wet coats in the library." My first impulse was to defend the map already clipped to the board. Instead, I pulled it down and handed him the marker. "Change it." He redrew the route in 3 lines. Sienna watched from the table where she was recapping the silver pen. "You did not even argue," she said. "I am exhausted." Mateo returned the marker. "Whatever helps you grow." The revised route cut the projected entry time by 6 minutes and kept the main staircase clear for emergency access. I wrote Mateo's name beside the change so the evening report would show who had made it. Sienna noticed that too. "You normally sign every operational revision," she said. "I normally deserve all the blame." "And the credit?" "I am experimenting with accuracy." She looked down at the broken ink in her signature, then drew one clean line beneath Mateo's route. "Careful," she said. "People may start trusting you." The sentence should have felt like a joke. It stayed with me after she turned away. At 2, I sent her to the private cabin on the East Ridge. She resisted for exactly 9 seconds. "I do not need to rest." "You have been awake since 4. So have you—" I own the consequences of looking exhausted. "And I do not. You have to sit beside Chairman Vale at dinner." "That is an argument for sedation." I held out the cabin keycard. 30 minutes. Priya has the structure. Lena has the kitchen. Mateo has the grounds. I have the command board. "You make delegations sound like a controlled substance." "I am trying a low dose." She took the keycard. "There is Earl Grey on the counter," I said. 4 minutes, 1 raw sugar packet. Her eyebrows rose. "You know the steep time? I know you leave it in too long when you are distracted and then blame the tea." "I do not blame the tea." "You called it punitive during the March budget review." "That tea was punitive." "You never stir the sugar." She looked at me for a beat, then at the command board behind me. "Operational concern?" she asked. "Documented pattern?" A smile touched her face and stayed there long enough to change the air between us. 30 minutes, she said. When she walked away, I wanted to follow. Instead, I updated the wind log. At 3:10, the guest buses passed the lower checkpoint. By 4, the first donors were checking into the canvas suites, where heaters hummed under polished wood frames and the river sounded gentler through insulated walls. The lodge fallback remained ready. The wind held below the limit. The event team moved with the nervous efficiency of people who understood that calm was a group project. Lena's dual menu went to print on cream stock. Sienna's centerpieces filled the pavilion with pine, fern, and stone. Mateo stationed 2 ground staff near the river path with lanterns and radios. Priya reviewed the final tension readings and left her signed clearance at my station. At 5:30. Sienna returned from the cabin wearing a structured emerald gown with a wool wrap over her shoulders. The color belonged in the room without competing with it. She handed me a revised seating chart. I moved Vale away from the developer representative. She said, "They were seated together? His assistant changed it yesterday." "Why?" "Because Vale intends to discuss the sale tonight, even if the gala succeeds." There it was, the social thread hidden inside the practical one. Chairman Vale did not merely want the weekend to fail. He wanted the developer close enough to make success look temporary. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Numbers, not performance. By 8. I want current auction totals, projected room revenue, and the cost of the road repair. If he argues that the resort is sentimental, I want the answer on paper before he finishes the sentence." I reached for the command board, then stopped. "Do you want the road estimate conservative or midpoint?" She noticed the question. "Conservative," she said, "and separate capital repair from operating expense." Done. The old version of me would have decided what she needed and called it protection. Asking took 2 seconds. The difference felt larger than the time. At 6:45, the welcome reception opened in the lodge. The wind remained below Priya's limit, but the temperature had dropped enough that keeping guests outside would have served the photograph instead of the people. Dinner began at 7. Lena's team sent both mains at safe temperatures with updated allergen cards. The wild mushroom poultry drew more compliments than the advertised short rib. Lena passed my station. "I will accept your apology in the form of a new combi oven." I was not aware I had apologized. "You delegated, it counts." At 8:10, the silent auction passed the previous year's total. At 8:12, Nina from AV appeared beside me with an expression I had learned not to ignore. "Ground loop hum on the primary microphone," she said. "It came in after the lighting dimmer changed scenes. I need 6 minutes to isolate it. The keynote begins in 5, then he begins in 11. I looked toward the podium. Chairman Vale looked at his watch. Sienna stood beside him, listening while he spoke to the developer representative. I keyed the floor channel, hold the keynote, extend table service by 1 course of coffee and petit fours. Nina, you have 6 minutes. Log the cable swap and test both backup channels. Already printed the repair ticket. Good. I took the real-time donation ledger from the printer and crossed the room. Vale's gaze found me before I reached him. "Parker," he said, "the keynote is scheduled for 8:15. The updated donation figures reached the speaker's briefing packet. "Late," I said. "I authorized a short hold so the final number can be included accurately." Sienna looked at me. Vale looked at the bound ledger I handed him. "We are 21% above last year." I continued, "Weekend occupancy is at 96%. The 6-month return guest rate is 14 points above the urban portfolio. The road repair is separated as a capital expense on page 4. He opened the ledger. The developer representative stopped smiling. "This is current?" Vale asked. "Printed 90 seconds ago." He studied the numbers long enough for Nina's voice to reach my earpiece. "Clean signal, backup tested, repair log signed." I did not touch the headset. "The keynote can begin in 1 minute, I said. Vale closed the ledger. "Excellent recovery, Parker, and strong operational discipline." The words mattered less than the person forced to say them. Sienna met my eyes over the ledger. I gave her the smallest nod. She turned to Vale. "Since the property has exceeded the operating case, I assume the developer discussion is no longer relevant tonight." Vale's jaw tightened. The committee will review the numbers, he said. It will? She replied. With the full operating record, not a photograph of one washed-out road. The keynote began on a clean microphone. No one in the room knew how close the sound system had come to making the first note of the speech unbearable. That was the work, not hiding mistakes, but giving them a place to be fixed before they became the story. At 9:30, the wind fell. At 10, the auction closed 34% above the prior year. At 11, Vale's car left the property without the developer representative. Mateo found me beside the command board while the staff cleared glassware. You listened today, he said. I usually listen. You usually wait for silence and then do what you planned. That is still technically listening. He handed me the final anchor readings. Priya says the pavilion can stay up through teardown tomorrow. Good. He started to walk away, then turned back. The coffee note was not subtle. I do not know what you mean. Of course not. He left before I could ask how many staff members had seen it. I found Sienna at midnight on the deck behind the pavilion. The river was dark beyond the railing. The string lights reflected in her club soda, moving whenever her hand moved. Her silver pen rested against the rim of the glass. Tap, tap, then stillness. I stopped a respectful distance away and leaned against the railing. For a while, neither of us spoke. The day had contained enough words that silence felt earned. They are renewing the lease, she said at last. Vale told me before he left. 2 years, with the road repair approved as capital investment. I looked toward the black line of the river. You saved the asset. We saved it. You made the board fund it. You made it worth funding. A light from the cleaning crew moved behind us, then disappeared inside. Sienna turned the silver pen between her fingers. For 6 months, she said. I told myself I kept reviewing your reports because this property was the most exposed asset in my portfolio. That was responsible. It was also dishonest. I waited. She looked at the water, not at me. I knew when you changed the auction layout without asking that I should be angry. You were angry. I also knew exactly why you had done it before you explained. Her thumb ran over the pen clip. That frightened me more than the decision. Understanding my bad habits is a serious professional risk. You joke when you do not know what to say. I document patterns. There, you did it again. I looked down at my hands. She set the club soda on the railing. I go back to the city tomorrow, she said. You stay here. Monday morning, the board turns this weekend into minutes and ratios. We return to video calls. We stop before anything personal reaches the agenda. The pen tapped once. We had 1 weekend, she said. Her voice dropped beneath the river. Make it count. There were several ways to answer. The easiest would have been to treat the night as separate from morning, to let the success, the exhaustion, and the empty deck decide for us. I had spent the entire day learning that urgency was not permission. No, I said. Her fingers closed around the pen. She took half a step back. I see. Sienna. You do not have to explain. I do. I kept my hands on the railing. I will not turn this into something that disappears when the board reconvenes. I will not ask you to carry a secret relationship inside a portfolio you supervise, and I will not use one difficult weekend to pretend we have answered every question about each other. She looked at me then. The pen remained still in her hand. What are you saying? I am saying I want Tuesday. A line appeared between her eyebrows. Tuesday? I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and unfolded a single sheet of paper. Not a contract. Not a 3-month calendar. 1 page. At 10 on Tuesday, I have the operating review at the city office, I said. At 12:30, I reserved a table at Bellini's, 2 blocks from your building. Before that lunch, we disclose this to compliance. You recuse from direct oversight of Alder Run. An independent portfolio lead takes the property. If the board refuses that structure, we do not date while you supervise me. She read the page. The first section contained the compliance contact and disclosure steps. The second contained the lunch reservation. The third was blank except for 1 line. Anything after Tuesday requires 2 people, not 1 plan. Her eyes stopped there. You left space, she said. I have been informed that making every decision myself is not universally comforting. Who informed you? An aggressive coalition consisting of you, Matteo, Priya, and Chef Lena. That is a strong committee. They have no respect for hierarchy. She looked down at the page again. What happens when we go back, she asked. The question stayed between us without being rushed. We tell the truth, I said. We remove the professional leverage, we have lunch. After that, we decide one step at a time. I drive to the city sometimes. You come here sometimes. Neither of us moves, transfers, or gives up a career to prove we are serious. And if the board makes it difficult? We let compliance be difficult before we let secrecy become dangerous. Her mouth softened. And if lunch is terrible? I pay. That is not enough. You choose dessert. Still weak. I listened to your full argument about slide 19 without interrupting. That is commitment. The pen slipped from her fingers and landed on the paper instead of the deck. She did not pick it up. She stepped closer. I stayed where I was until her hand reached my jacket and rested against the lapel. Tuesday at 12:30, she said. Yes. I am not agreeing to your 3-month operational calendar. I did not make one. You thought about making one. I made one and deleted it. That laugh was quiet, but this time she did not check who might hear. She moved the last few inches and rested her forehead against my chest. I waited until her shoulders settled. Then I put my arms around her. The embrace was warm, steady, and free of the panic the day had tried to teach us. Her hands loosened against my jacket. The river continued beyond the railing, indifferent to contracts, promotions, and the fact that I had finally left part of the future unplanned. Make this count, she murmured. I will, not by fixing it. I looked down at the top of her head. By showing up, she said, I can do that. On Monday morning, Sienna sat at the boardroom table while I joined from Alder Run. Vale, legal counsel, compliance, and Claire Donovan from the Western portfolio were present. Sienna placed her silver pen beside a disclosure statement. I intend to explore a personal relationship with Theo Parker, she said. Nothing began while I held direct authority over Alder Run. Effective today, I recuse myself from its approvals, compensation matters, and performance reviews. Claire will assume independent oversight. This is unnecessary drama over one lunch, Vale said. It is necessary governance before one lunch. Claire confirmed the transition. Compliance approved the structure, and I agreed to report through her. Vale signed. The board renewed the lease for 2 years, funded the road reconstruction, and added permanent pavilion upgrades to the capital plan. Before Sienna left, she looked into the camera. 12:30. I will be there. 6 months later, the river ran low beneath a clear autumn sky. The glamping tents were closed for the shoulder season, their canvas walls cleaned, dried, and stored. The new South Road had proper drainage, a reinforced base, and 2 pullouts for service vehicles. Priya's permanent anchor system had been installed at the pavilion. Lena's dual entree had become a seasonal feature because donors kept requesting the emergency chicken. She still wanted the combi oven. I was reviewing the winter maintenance budget at the scarred oak desk in the lodge when the front door opened. Cold air moved through the room. Sienna crossed the hardwood carrying 2 ceramic mugs of coffee. She set mine beside the keyboard, black and unsweetened, then placed hers near the window. A cardboard moving box rested against her hip. She lowered it onto the leather sofa. The last one, she said. Her transfer to remote portfolio strategy had become official the week before. It was not a sacrifice made to live at the resort. She had designed the role herself, kept her promotion, and retained no direct authority over Alder Run. Claire still led every property review and had developed an alarming affection for unannounced audits. Sienna kept a small apartment in the city for board weeks. I kept Tuesday lunch blocked whenever we were both there. Not every lunch was good. Once, we argued for 40 minutes about staffing assumptions and missed the reservation entirely. We ate sandwiches on a bench outside her office. She still believed slide 19 had been cautious. Some matters did not require closure. She came behind my chair and rested her hands on my shoulders. Her thumbs found the tight muscles at the base of my neck. The catering trucks came up the South Road in 42 minutes. She said, "I saw the gate log. No delays." "I saw that too. No emergency river fleet." I kept the manifest template. "For sentimental reasons? Recurring operational risk." She laughed and pressed her cheek briefly against my hair. I covered one of her hands with mine. On the desk, beside the winter budget, lay her silver fountain pen. I had taken it to a repair specialist in the city after she admitted the problem was not always the paper. The nib had been aligned, polished, and tested. Sienna reached past me, opened the budget to the approval page, and signed her acknowledgement as strategy lead. The pen moved in one unbroken line. Beside the river outside, nothing was perfectly still, but the silver nib no longer needed a perfect surface to leave a clear mark. The end. Closing thoughts. Core lesson: a lasting relationship is not proven by one dramatic weekend. It is built by telling the truth, sharing decisions, and continuing to show up after the crisis has passed. Green flag. Theo does not use urgency, professional leverage, or Sienna's vulnerability to push intimacy. He slows down, respects her authority, accepts independent oversight, and leaves room for both of them to choose the future together. Audience question: would you have accepted Theo's Tuesday lunch plan, or would you have asked for more time? Please like and subscribe so we can share more stories like this.